Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. My name is Hack, and in this video, we'll be going over what is, in my opinion, the easiest stamina build you can use to clear veteran arenas in the Elder Scrolls Online. This is our Stamina Sorcerer Perfect Storm build, updated for the Waking Flame DLC and beyond, with insane damage, speed, survivability, and self-healing, and no trials gear or mythic items necessary. That's right, with just basic gear, you too can clear the toughest arenas in ESO, and this build will help you get there, so let's get started. Alright everybody, we are back on the Stamina Sorcerer with an updated build. This time focused on those solo arenas, whether it's Maelstrom, Vateshran Hollows, whatever you're trying to accomplish. This is by far the easiest stamina focused build I have played. Super powerful, tons of mobility and survivability, as well as passive self-healing. Like I said in the intro, no trials gear, no mythics are required, though if you have access to those, this build will be even more powerful. So let's jump into the buff stats on the build. Checking out our stat sheet, we are at about 13,000 max magicka, 21,000 max health, about 30,000 max stamina. 1,700 stamina recovery is looking pretty good. We have other means of getting our stamina back as well, which we'll talk about. 5,300 weapon damage. That'll be over 6,000 weapon damage when you consider your back bar glyph. 56% weapon critical is looking pretty solid. And then we do get an armor buff on the Sorcerer, which is quite good. It gives us mobility as well, so about 17,000 spell and physical resistance. We do have tons of damage mitigation, though, also through champion points, as well as damage shields that are really going to help you survive those solo arenas. So we'll talk about those more in a bit as well. 64 points into max stamina. That's what you're going to want on the Stam Sorc. For food, I'm using the Lava Foot Soup, and this just gives a ton of stamina recovery as well as max stamina. You can also use something like Dubious Cameron Throne. You have a little bit less stamina recovery, but more health, which might be good if you are a newer player especially. The more health you can get, the better. You can also offset that a little bit with your armor glyphs, which I have done. Now, as far as the Mundus Stone, the Thief is going to be very important on the Stamina Sorcerer. That's because we want our crit rating as high as possible because our heals are actually dependent on those crit attacks. So Thief is probably your ideal Mundus Stone on this setup. Potions, you have different options. I'm just running the basic weapon power potions because I want the extra weapon critical. Sorcerers do get weapon power, that major brutality from their crit surge buff, but they don't have a class buff for crit chance. So you will want a potion with at least crit chance on it. You can use weapon power potions, or I believe there is a stamina, health, and crit chance potion that you can craft. That would be really good as well. Those would be my top two picks for this build. And then in terms of the race, lots of races will be fine on this build. Honestly, Khajiit is what I've gone with. I feel like Khajiit is very strong for arenas. Due to the Feline Ambush passive, this gives you a bunch of extra crit damage and crit healing. You also get all of your max stats, which is quite useful. Almost 1,000 health, magicka, and stamina is really good. Plus some extra recoveries. All around, it's just a really solid choice, Khajiit. But you could go with something like Orc. Orc is a little bit faster. You get more health, you get more weapon damage, more stamina, so that'd be a good option as well. So I think that covers the basics. Let's talk about the gear sets next. Starting with our first 5-piece set, and Deadly Strike here is going to be really powerful on not just this build, but any stamina build where you really want to focus on dots, damage over time effects. So what Deadly Strike does, if you're not familiar, it gives you weapon damage, weapon critical, weapon damage again, and it also increases the damage of your damage over time and channeled abilities by 18%. So this is going to buff basically every skill that we have on this build has some damage over time component, and it's going to get a huge buff from Deadly Strike. Now, this is actually a Cyrodiil set. You get this from PvP, but it's just as easy to get this from guild merchants. You can pick this up on the guild traders, search for it, and you should be able to find the pieces fairly easily. Now, I do recommend two-handed Maul for this build. Maul gives you upfront penetration through the two-handed passives, which we'll look at a little bit later. That's just going to be really good for any arena where you want your damage to be as much true damage as possible. You want as much penetration as possible. So Deadly Maul is the way to go if you can get it. We've got Precise as the trait here. Again, we want more crit chance on the Stamina Sorcerer to proc our heals, and then Absorb Stamina as the enchant. So this is going to be our front bar weapon. And then we're just combining this with 3 pieces of jewelry. So we got the deadly necklace, 2 rings, weapon damage enchants to what you want on all of these. Infused would be a good trait. Some bloodthirsty would be a good trait. Even if you have robust, the basic trait, that's going to be fine as well. I just have infused here for a little bit extra weapon damage. Now that brings us to our next set, which is going to be Leviathan. Leviathan is a dungeon set, but it's pretty easy to pick up. Crypt of Hearts. And we're running this on the body, so you don't even have to finish the entire dungeon. You can just farm the first few couple bosses and pick up your body pieces. This is pretty much a must-have set for if you have a lot of stamina builds. You can flex this in and out, different builds, different characters. It's very useful because it gives you max stamina and then tons of weapon critical. It's basically stamina version of Mother's Sorrow. So you do want to pick this up eventually. It's very useful. Even more so on the Stam Sorc, I think, because again, we want that crit chance as high as possible. And crit chance is a little bit harder to come by nowadays in ESO. So sets like this are very good. And we do want divines on everything. This is a medium armor set with the max stamina enchants. We've got the boots, legs, hands, waist, and chest. You can see I did throw in a couple of max health enchants. I think that's going to be important, especially if you are a newer player. You're trying to complete these solo arenas on vets. You want over 20k health. If you can get up to like 21, 22, even more, 23k health, that's going to help you a lot just because you might not have a quick reaction to something. You might chunk some damage, and you want to be able to survive that if you can. So 2 to 3 health enchants is good. Now, like I said, this build is super simple. No trials gear, no mythics. Basic monster set options. I would go with anything that either increases your defense or gives you a damage shield. So that's why I slotted Ice Heart on this build. It's actually great for all builds, not even just Magicka builds. It's good for stamina builds as well. You won't take advantage of the crit chance so much because it's spell critical, but you will get a nice juicy damage shield. And the damage actually got buffed, almost 2k frost damage to all enemies in an AoE. So it's a very powerful set just for that passive damage shield. This is going to help your survivability a ton because we have very high crit chance to begin with. We're getting those crit damage strikes all the time. So as far as the weight on this, medium is good. You could run a couple of light pieces. You could run one light, one heavy. It's really up to you. I'm using medium on everything though. So 7 pieces of medium, all divines, max stam, and then 2 to 3 max health enchants. Now, backbar bow is up to you. I've got the Maelstrom bow. Obviously, if you're just learning Maelstrom, you might not have this yet. In that case, something like a deadly bow, so you can keep that 5-piece set on the back bar. That'll help you squeeze out a little bit extra damage. It won't be on the back bar a ton of time. It will be mostly on the front bar, but that would be an option. If you don't have that, just any simple crafted bow, bow of agility, something like that for your back bar weapon will be fine. The main thing you want is you want the infused trait on your bow with a weapon damage enchant. When you're fully buffed, that'll be closer to like 600, 700 extra weapon damage for free just by using your bow abilities. So that's going to be really helpful on this build. So that is the setup again. We got Deadly Strike, front bar, and jewelry. Running Leviathan on the body. Ice Heart monster set, and then a back bar Maelstrom bow. I will have other options for gear over on the written guide. So if you want to see what this would look like with trials gear, with a mythic item, make sure you check out the link. I'll have different versions of the gear over on the written guide. Let's go ahead and jump into skills quickly, starting on the front bar. Remember, the focus of this build is dot damage as well as mobility. So we'll have tons of dots here, starting with Barbed Trap. This comes from the Fighters Guild skill line. Uber powerful dot. You can see here, unbuffed, about 20k bleed damage. That's that Deadly Strike set coming into full effect here. And not only that, that's giving us the minor force buff, so 10% crit damage done is really good as well. Basically, just drop this on the ground where you know an enemy is going to spawn, or you can put it in front of you, so those melee enemies will walk right into it. They'll actually get rooted in place. They'll start taking that bleed damage, and you'll get the minor force buff thrown in. It's really, really good. Then we have Stampede. Stampede is a super powerful ability from the two-handed skill line. This is your second skill here. This got buffed recently, so now it does insane damage over time, and it's going to be buffed by Deadly Strike as well, obviously. 2.5k physical damage every 1 second to all enemies, so it's AoE damage over time. It's also a guaranteed crit strike. Big range on this, 22-meter range, so when you need to move around the battlefield, or if, let's say, you need to get up close to an enemy, stun them, or interrupt them from casting something nasty on you, then you're going to want to use Stampede for that. Next up, we've got a flex spot, and I've got Dark Deal here, and I'll tell you why I think this is really good. Dark Deal is a Sorcerer class ability, comes from Dark Magic. Second to last ability here. This is a burst heal that costs Magicka. And not only that, it also gives you Sustain. It gives you 3,600 stamina back instantly, an additional 2,400 stamina over 20 seconds. So this is burst heal, this is also Sustain. So you're basically getting 2 for 1 with this ability. So yes, you could run other burst heals. You could run Rally if you wanted to. You could run a heal over time like Resolving Vigor. If you're more comfortable with Vigor, you could put Vigor in this spot. But I like the fact that this does both for me. It gives me a big juicy burst heal, and it also gives me the stamina. Stamina sustain is really important on this build, especially against some of the tougher arena bosses where you don't have as many adds to give you stamina back. Dark Deal is really, really useful. Now, next up is going to be our main damaging ability, like our spammable attack on the front bar. That's actually going to be Carve from the two-ended skill line. And Carve got buffed recently as well. This got a major buff in the fact that it does bleed damage over time, it does upfront AoE damage, and it now gives you a damage shield. So about 7,000 damage shield for 6 seconds, plus just tons of damage over time. You can see it's a 7.5k shield fully buffed here. And again, it's AoE, so you're applying that bleed to all enemies that you hit with the Carve, and it now stacks up to 3 times. I forgot to mention that. So you're getting 3 bleed ticks off of Carve now. This is really good because Brawler used to be the only morph that you could use really on the stamina build for the damage shield. So yeah, you can use Brawler still. You'll get a bigger damage shield, which might be good. Let's say if you're like brand new or you're very low champion point level, you might still want Brawler on this build to help you clear like your very first vet arena. But as you get more experience, think about morphing it back to Carve, because Carve is going to do a ton of damage, especially on this type of build where we're focused really heavily into those dots. It is so good, you guys. Make sure you try out this patch if you have not yet. Last normal ability is going to be Silver Leash. This comes from the Fighters Guild skill line. And the basic premise of this skill, why it's on the front bar, yeah, we'll get some good passives from this. But this is also a pull, like a chain pull from the Dragon Knight class. And the reason why this is really good is you have tons of dots on this build, but most of them are ground effects. So you're going to have this storm centered around you with all these AoEs. And you want to pull in those ranged mobs into your storm. So whether it's an archer, whether it's a mage, really, far away from you, pull them in. It's got a 22-meter range, which is pretty long. Pull those enemies into you, and that's it. They're going to die instantly to your AoEs. So it's really useful. Can't recommend that enough. You'll see it used somewhat in the gameplay clips here. Front bar ultimate is really up to you. Flawless Dawnbreaker is a great option. This comes from the Fighters Guild skill line. It's great AoE damage, great damage over time as well. That's going to be buffed by Deadly Strike, by the way. Now, I will tell you another really interesting option if you want to try it out is going to be in your class skills, Dark Magic and Suppression Field. Suppression Field is interesting. Now, it does do magic damage, but this patch, Deadly Strike actually got changed to increase all of your damage over time abilities, including magic damage. That includes like fire damage, shock damage, whatever. It's all buffed by Deadly Strike this patch, which is pretty interesting for classes like Sorcerer, Stamina Sorcerer, and Stamina Templar, who have some magic-based AoEs that they can actually use. So yeah, Suppression Field is pretty good because it's also a stun. It's an AoE stun that does a ton of damage in the area. Pretty long duration too, 12 seconds, and you get some good passives from this as well. You might want to play around with that. That's going to lock down enemies in place and do a ton of damage. But just for more general stuff, then I would say Flawless Dawnbreaker. Let's go ahead and swap to the back bar, which is our bow setup. Of course, we're going to have some bow skills here, starting with Endless Hail. I use this morph just because it's a longer duration. This is what gives you that weapon damage enchant on the back bar, by the way. So having this up for longer, it's about 14 seconds. That's just going to help maintain that buff for as long as possible. And then combined with that, we have our Hurricane, of course, from the Sorcerer class skills. That's from Storm Calling, your second ability here. Really, that's where the name of this build comes from, Perfect Storm. We talked about this already, right? You have all of these different AoE effects, AoE damage over times, that you're just throwing onto yourself or the ground, pull in those enemies to those damaging effects, and they are done. They're just going to get shredded. You also get some nice movement speed with this. You get the major resolve, so that's your physical and spell resistance. Really good skill overall. You want to maintain that 100% of the time if you can. Next up, we have Razor Caltrops. This is a very essential ability. This comes from your PvP assault skill line, by the way. Now, why is this so good? Well, it, again, is AoE damage over time. It also snares enemies, and it applies major breach. So this reduces their armor for that duration. And this is good because it's going to make all of your other damage over time tick for more damage, right? The lower armor your enemy has, the more damage your abilities do to that enemy. So you have this on the ground all the time. It's going to increase all of your outgoing damage. Really, really powerful. Then another dot. This is single target though. Poison Injection comes from the bow skill line. Now I will just use this on like single target. So the beefier enemies like bosses will definitely get a poison injection from me. But also ranged enemies that can't be pulled. There are a few of those in like in Maelstrom Arena, the later stages. Those enemies cannot be pulled, but you can do like a poison injection plus a light attack, and that will be enough to almost kill them right away. So that's really what this ability is used for. It's very useful in that case. You can also try the other morph, which is a ranged interrupt. I didn't find that I needed that quite so much because I do have Stampede. I can gap close and bash. But if you're just learning, like let's say Maelstrom Arena for the first time, it might be helpful to switch it out to the other morph. And our final normal ability is going to be Crit Surge that comes from Storm Calling. And this is our passive healing, right? This is why Stam Sorc is such a powerful choice for the solo arenas, because you don't have to worry about healing so much. You know, we have a lot of shields on this build. We have the Carve shield. We have Ice Heart or another monster set running a shield for us. And so what's nice about Crit Surge is you have all of this dot damage going out, right? And as long as one of those ticks crits, and it will, trust me, you're going to get 3,300 health back. That heal itself can crit as well, by the way. So you're looking at 6K heals most of the time on this build. And then finally, Ballista is just a good single target ultimate. I'll reserve this for really beefy bosses. This does a ton of single target damage, so you will want to save up for that. But that's the basic skill loadout. Now we can talk about, rotation a little bit. I mean, it's pretty simple. You do have your two buffs here, so Hurricane and Crit Surge. And then let's talk about that Storm that we laid down, that AoE field of dots. So really what you want to do is make sure your trap is down. Enemies will walk into that. You'll get that buff. And then Endless Hail Caltrops. This is your Storm, right? Anything that's in this area is pretty much dead within a couple seconds. But on top of that, you can combine those other AoE dots from your front bar. So that's Stampede and Carve. So you can see there's tons of dot damage ticking now. We have, 5 to 6 dots on the target at once. So that's really how it works. And then again, if you have any enemies that are out of that range, you just want to chain pull them in. Obviously, that's not going to work on a dummy, but you just pull them in with your silver leash, and that's it. You're good to go. Let's talk about passives real quick. I don't want this to get too long. Sorcerer class passives are really good. Bottom line, you're going to want pretty much all of these. Unholy Knowledge is great for the cost reduction. Blood Magic we're not really using unless you decide to use Crystal Weapon for some reason. Persistence and Exploitation, they're okay. You can pick those up if you want, but they're not necessary. Daedric Summoning is quite good for Power Stone. This is the main one you want in Daedric Summoning. Reduce the cost of your ultimate by 15%. That's huge. Now, I wish I could get Daedric Protection on this build, but I don't have any of these abilities slotted right now. You could slot the Storm Atronach if you want, and if you do that, you get an extra 20% stamina recovery, so that ends up being really good on this build. If you can find a way to work in one of those on the build, I couldn't find a way. Now, for Storm Calling, yes, you'll want pretty much all of these. You want the extra magical recovery, you want the extra physical damage, extra flat damage, and then the extra weapon and spell damage. All those passives are great. Two-handed, yes, pick up all your passives here, as well as the bow passives. And then we're running full medium armor on this build, which I think is great. We have pretty good crit chance, and dexterity is now giving us critical damage. So you can see 14% bonus crit damage. If you can get your build up to like 50, 60% crit chance, you're going to get a lot of bonus damage from this. This is basically like an extra Shadow Mundus that you have now on medium armor builds for free. I did a whole video on how the armor passives are changing for Waking Flame DLC. I'd recommend you check that out if you haven't yet. But basically, medium armor builds get more crit damage. Light armor builds get more crit chance. And we have things obviously like agility that's going to increase our weapon damage by 14%, so that's really good as well. Guild passes, we can talk about Fighter's Guild because we're using quite a bit here on the front bar. 3 abilities actually. So Slayer is giving us 3% weapon damage per Fighter's Guild ability slotted. This is really useful. Make sure you pick that one up. As well as Banish the Wicked for the extra ultimate when you kill an enemy. And Skill Tracker, your Fighter's Guild abilities deal additional damage. Don't forget this one. This will let those abilities hit a lot harder. Other guilds, not so much. Assault, we are running Assault abilities, but you don't need the passives necessarily. Yes, racial passives. Yes, Alchemy, medicinal use for the extra potion duration. Quickly, let's go over champion points. Now, I will have in the written guide loadouts for 300, 600, 900, and 1200 CP. Make sure you check those out if you're interested. But basically, we have the main green tree setup that I use. My slotted stars are Steed's Blessing, Liquid Efficiency, Rationer, and Treasure Hunter. Over in the blue tree, we're going to start with Precision and then jump right into Piercing. Make sure you pick that up because that's going to give you your main damage stars here, which are super important on this build. Biting Aura, extra AoE damage. This affects like your Stampede, your Carve, Hurricane, all that stuff gets buffed by Biting Aura. Then Mastered Arms, direct damage. Again, Stampede, Carve, your main front bar damage sources will get buffed by an extra 10%. Then Thaumaturge, of course, everything we have, every damaging ability has at least some dot damage tied to it. 10% bonus dot damage from this. You can see you're getting a bunch of extra damage here. Make sure you get these as soon as possible. 4th star is really up to you. Your 4th slotted star, you have some options. Something that would be pretty powerful is Fighting Finesse. This gives you an extra 10% crit damage and crit healing. I would actually recommend if you are a newer player learning these arenas for the first time, check out Reaving Blows. When you deal direct damage, you heal for 7% of the damage done. So this ends up being kind of a replacement for Ring of the Pale Order. I mean, not really. Ring of the Pale Order is super easy mode compared to this, but this will give you some extra healing off like your light attacks, your Stampede, your Carve. All those direct damage components, you'll get some extra healing back, which is actually quite nice. If you have anything extra beyond then, I would go into some of the passives, right? So Battle Mastery and Mighty are quite good. And then defensive passives, you'll want these pretty quick as well. Quick Recovery, Preparation for the 10% damage reduction. That's huge for only 20 points. Make sure you pick that up. And you have Elemental Aegis and Hardy as well. And then Red Tree, main slotted stars here. Definitely pick up Boundless Vitality. I probably would get that first for the extra max health. I'll start working up here. Work all the way up to Hero's Vigor. Get that. That's 500 more max health. And then your next slotted star should be Bloody Renewal. So 1500 stamina back per kill. This is an amazing amount of sustain on these arena situations where you have tons of ads coming in, right? Waves of ads or things like that. You'll get lots of stamina back. Then a couple other choices that I like on this build. Bastion is the damage shield slotted star. So 15% increase to your damage shields. That's going to buff your monster set. That's going to buff Carve's damage shield. Even if you want to, I forgot to mention this, you could run an infused damage shield glyph on your Deadly Maul, on your front bar weapon, to get even more passive shielding on this build. That's a really good tip. If you're struggling with these solo arenas, Bastion's going to buff all of those. So it's actually really good. And then something you can try out this patch is Thrill of the Hunt. This is a new CP slotted coming in the Wake and Flame DLC. It gives you Major Expedition for 6 seconds when you kill an enemy. So it's basically like the Vicious Ophidian set, but you can get it through champion points now. So this is pretty cool. It's nice for stamina builds. Just to have that extra mobility, plus we already have the extra speed of the Stamsorc, so it's pretty good. So that's what I'd recommend there. Again, you can check out the written guides for all the details for different loadouts, 300, 600, 900, and 1200 champion points. Last but not least, if you're wondering about the look of this character, it's not an outfit style. It's the Polymorph from Maelstrom Arena. So once you're able to clear Maelstrom Arena for the first time, you'll get this polymorph. It's called the Maelstrom Baron. All right, everybody, and with that said, that's going to wrap up our solo Stamina Sorcerer Perfect Storm build. Hope you found this helpful and informative. Of course, if you did, do us a favor and crush that like button so that YouTube knows to share this video out with more people. If you're new here to the channel, consider subscribing because I create many more ESO builds just like this, as well as ESO guides and news to keep you up to date. Remember that if you have any questions at all on the build, check out the written guide. I will have alternate gear sets there, alternate skills, champion point loadouts for CP 300, 600, 900, 1200, and much, much more. Link for that will be in the description and the pinned comment down below. We'll end this video with a bit of Vet Maelstrom Arena so you can see more about how the build plays. But as always, thank you all so much for watching. I hope you're doing well. Stay safe out there, and I will see you around in the next video.
Your hot blood!